Hello, Millville Elementary School families and friends. We are here with Mrs. Barton and Mrs. Allard to talk about Title I reading services. So we have some questions. And the first is, what is Title I?
So Title I is funding that we get from the federal government that helps us to support students' learning. We get it based on socioeconomic status of our population, but also kind of how we're performing as a district and as a school. So we recently Millville became a Title I school this year, actually. We had been getting Title I funding to work with specific students, but now we're getting it for the entire school.
Perfect. So if I were a parent, how do I know if my child is receiving Title I services?
So,
Go ahead.
so it used to be that you would get one of these compacts. A letter would go home and you would sign a compact. But now that we are school-wide Title I, the teachers, as well as myself and Mrs. Schaefer and Mrs. Barton, all kind of work together to identify students who are starting to struggle and slip, and we pull them into small groups. So we don't necessarily send a note home. I have been sending notes home if I'm going to take a student for more than a month or a 6-week period.
Makes sense.
So what grade levels receive Title I support at Millville Elementary School?
Well, now that we're a school-wide Title I district, it's school-wide. So any student at Millville Elementary that's identified by a teacher, by Mrs. Allard, by Mrs. Schaefer, by looking at data that shows they're starting to struggle can be identified and pulled into a small group.
And how often will my child be pulled out of class? You said they'd be pulled out of class, so how often will they be pulled?
That depends on both scheduling and their need. I have students that I meet with 3 times a week because their need right now is pretty great. And I have students that I check in with once a week, and we kind of work on a strategy, and then they have the week to practice it and come back to me and we regroup.
So if my child's being pulled out of class, how do they make up the work that they're missing?
That is between the student and the teacher. Some teachers will modify. We do really try to pull out during reading time. So what they're missing is really what we're working on. Unfortunately, sometimes that doesn't work because life's not perfect. And when they go back to class, they make it up during whatever makeup period they have. And the teacher works with them on that.
Perfect. And so what can I do to support my children at home?
Well, there are a number of things that parents can do at home to help any adult, older siblings, things like that. I think the most important thing that you can do to help support this is to read with them, whether they're in preschool, kindergarten, or whether they're in middle school, high school. Reading with them and to them and asking questions and having discussions with them about what they're reading, what are the characters like, what do they notice, are they making connections between this book and another book, or this book and something they heard about in the world. That's really the most effective and most important way to support your learners at home.
The reading with part, I have to agree, is very important. We kind of, as parents, get to that point where we're like, oh, good, you can read by yourself. Go read. But, reading books that the students may not necessarily be able to access but would still be interested in. My parents used to sit with me, my dad especially, and read like the classics and Tom Sawyer and Treasure Island and Swiss Family Robinson. I could have never accessed those on my own as a student in elementary or middle school. Just the vocabulary and the sentence structure was too much. But to have him sit with me and my brother and read those with us as a family, it really solidified a love of reading, and we were able to discuss the vocabulary and the concepts and, the time period difference.
And I think you're able to reach beyond their range at that point. So they may be interested in a topic that there aren't any books that are on a level where they're able to decode on their own. But if you can read with them and have those conversations, then they can continue to read on a subject they're interested in and be able to access the book appropriately.
And that goes for like a lot of fiction books too. Like a lot of times there'll be books that they're interested in. The topics and kind of the situations involved really may not necessarily be super appropriate for this age level, but if you're sitting and reading with them, you can kind of work through those situations.
Have those discussions and ask them questions. Don't be afraid to stop and say, what do you think that meant? And when you're asking questions, really what you want to be asking are open-ended questions. So questions that are not yes, no answers. What do you think? What do you feel? How do you connect? You know, questions that are going to make them think, and really they need more than a one-word answer for.
Or something they can point to in the book. That one, really making sure that they...
And at the younger age, you're asking, what do the pictures tell you? One of the great things you can do with kids that are younger, and older kids too, but pick a book that doesn't have any words. The Carl series, the Good Dog Carl series, are wordless picture books. I know Journey is another wordless picture book.
Truck.
I mean, there are a lot of them
Yeah.
out there, and those are a great way to have kids kind of look at the pictures and notice and be able to use language and tell you what's happening without having to decode words.
Those inferring skills that so often they need for comprehension and don't necessarily get a whole lot of practice at home or when they're reading on their own because they're not stopping and going, what do I infer there? They're...
I think as a parent also just modeling
Yep.
for your child how you would think if you were reading the book. I think that's a huge piece as well.
Yes.
Yeah, students definitely still need to hear that fluency piece and how you might phrase words and that expression. It makes it more interesting for them.
All right, so how do I know if I'm reading to my child at home, how do I know what type of books that they should be reading at home?
Ask them.
Yeah.
Ask them what they're interested in, take them to the library, and if you can't take them to the library, sometimes it's difficult with scheduling. There's a couple of really great apps. Libby, once you have a library card, you can go on and borrow any book and from the library for free. You just download it onto your phone or Kindle app, iPad, whatever, and you can read it right from there.
Epic is another one, but I think
Epic.
there's a cost to that.
Mayan, every student has
right.
access to Mayan, and you can read right from there. And just kind of asking them what they're interested in.
And the nice thing about Mayan is that if you don't have time to read to them, Mayan will read to them. So there's a piece where they can have it read to them. So if you don't have that few minutes, the computer program will read it for them.
And at the end of each book on Mayan, they're taking a short quiz, couple of questions that they need to answer that tells us that when we can look at the data, whether or not they really understood and comprehended either what was read to them or what they read.
So with all these things I'm going to do, how do I know if my child's making progress?
We send home progress reports 2 times a year, about mid-year and then at the end of the year. So as long as your student is receiving services at that time, then you'll get a progress report. The other piece is email us, call us. We'll happily take the few minutes to chit-chat and tell you what's going on, and we'd love to hear from you guys and input on your student and what's going on at home, because as we all know, sometimes what a student does at school is not necessarily what the parent sees at home, and that's really telling for us. So.
All right, so any other pieces you'd like to share with our families about Title I?
I don't know that this is specific to Title I, but once a month, Mrs. Schaefer puts out a newsletter for parents, and within that newsletter, Mrs. Allard and I include a Book Nook corner where we give tips for parents, favorite books maybe that are seasonal books or things that might be interest that time of year.
The literacy lunch book
Yep,
for
the
grades
literacy
3 through
lunch.
5 that we do is usually listed in there.
Kind of give a snippet about what we're working on in whole class
Yep.
with each grade level. And then hopefully we're going to be starting First Fridays, where Mrs. Allard and I will pick a book and we will read the first chapter of that book to each class and kind of hopes to get them hooked on that book. We're going to try and pick books that are part of a series so that there'll be more than one
Yep.
book if they decide they like it, that they can continue to read on with you, with siblings,
Yep.
with however they want to read it.
And if you ever have any questions, if you're watching this and something comes to mind, feel free to reach out. Excuse me, sorry.
And all emails are on the school website. So you can go on the school website, you can call the school if you need to, but all staff emails are available on the school website. So we have Mrs. Barton's email on there, as well as Mrs. Allard's email and myself. So thank you for watching. And
you very
hope
much
have
for
a
your
wonderful day and enjoy reading with your children.
Thank you.